In our today's session, we are going to cover about requirements management core principle. To summarize, we would understand how to manage requirements, what is the process of change management, how do we go about tracing, baselining, versioning requirements. Under versioning, we would see forward tracing, back tracing, bidirectional traceability of the requirements. Then we will touch base upon requirement traceability matrix. We would also look about how do we go about maintaining, reusing and prioritizing requirements. And then we will look about assessing our requirement changes and how do we get requirements approved from the respective stakeholder and what is the approval process for requirement. And then we would see what is progressive elaboration when it comes to requirement management. Now, so far, whatever we have covered in our past session, we have focused on three areas, that is requirement elicitation and gathering, requirement analysis and design, and we covered the strategy analysis part in the very earlier sessions wherein we understood how to write a business case, how to write your business requirement document, what is request for proposal. So those things comes under strategy analysis. Now, today we are going to touch base upon requirements management. If you um, compare it with the Babok perspective, it is also called as requirements lifecycle management knowledge area. Now, what this knowledge area has for us? Before that, we need to first understand how do we manage the requirements. Now, we have written the requirement, we have gathered the requirement, and we have also got the official approval from the respective stakeholder. Now it's high time that we should go about managing our requirements. Managing as in we need to organize our requirements. In other words, if you say business analysis information management approach. Now what is business analysis information management approach? Where we organize our requirements, like what are the categories of requirements that we have gathered so far, whether it falls under functional requirement, non-functional requirement, or your transitional requirement, or any XYZ category of requirement for that matter. Now we have the supporting artifacts for the requirement. We have created the process flows, we have created the functional specification, or we have created the UML use cases, data dictionary, UI screen mockups. We have created all the requirements artifacts. We have also identified the respective stakeholders who are essentially accountable for giving us those requirements to help us understand and execute that particular project. Now we should go about managing our requirement. This term is also called as business analysis information management approach. Now, why it is called as approach? Because this is our strategy towards managing the requirement, and this is based on the requirements architecture. Now, what is requirements architecture? Although the term is architecture, but it is not architecture. It has nothing to do with technicalities for that matter. Now, architecture in business analysis means how do we organize and manage our requirements, how we approach towards our requirements. Now, we have created a high level design document, that is business requirement document. After business requirement document, we have created some underlying low level design documents like your functional specification document. Now, under that functional specification document, we have created some supporting artifacts like your UML use cases or any XYZ artifacts of that category. Now, when a developer would come to us in order to understand the requirement, we have to run through him the overall architecture of the requirement, how the requirements are organized, like what is the highest level of the requirement, what is the lowest level of requirement, what are the connecting requirements that are in place. So as a whole, we have to summarize a developer that whenever you are starting up with your development work, you have to analyze the requirement from start to end. You don't pick up a particular functionality or feature in between and start developing blindly. You have to do a thorough technical impact analysis considering the end-to-end requirements documents that we have in place. So that is something we need to make them understand. For that matter, whether it's a developer or whether it's a QA guy or whether it's any XYZ interested stakeholder who is willing to undergo understanding around how we have organized our requirement. Now, the essential outcome that we are expecting out of requirement management process is we need to analyze, trace, prioritize, and get our requirements approved, and we have to manage them accordingly. So it's not a one-time activity as such, managing your requirement. As and when new requirements are introduced in your project, you have to identify its base requirement, like this requirements belong to this particular module, or this requirement belong to this particular feature, and you have to draw that traceability. You cannot put requirements like it is coming from the business. You have to understand where this requirement fits in, and then you have to establish a traceability, and then you have to put that requirement in that particular place. Now, these all things are never done manually. They are done through different tools, like we have Jira, or we have Visual Studio Online, or HP Project Portfolio Management tool, or CA Central. There are XYZ tools that are available to manage these requirements. Now, it's not mandatory that every company would be using these tools. Some company may use their own proprietary tool as well. For example, if you have worked for an organization like Wipro, or an organization like Accenture or L&T Infotech, they have their own proprietary tool which helps them manage this requirement. So it's not a hard and fast rule that we have to use Jira or HP PPM or Visual Studio Online, this thing. In order to save the cost, some companies use their own tool as well. Now, to start with today's session, we need to first understand the requirement management process. Now, in this particular requirement management, these are the core processes that gets executed during a project. First, we investigate around how do we elicit a particular requirement. Then we check the feasibility of that particular requirement, whether that particular requirement is doable or not. Then we go about designing the artifacts around those particular requirements, and then the development team starts constructing that particular requirement. After that, they do a testing of that particular requirement, and then the requirement is released to the end customer through their user acceptance testing. Now, in between, if there are any new requirements coming in place, then we have a change management process in place. Like if it is doable, we would deliver them in this particular release. If it is not doable, if the size of the requirement is too huge or it's too large, then we will postpone it to the very immediate next release. Now, like we all know, a requirement is the capability to which a project outcome, product or service should conform. Now, this core process is same for whether it's a service-based project or whether it's a product-based development. Irrespective of you are enhancing a particular existing application or you are developing an altogether new application or a product, the core process would remain same. So that is the core thing. Now, when it comes to requirement management, we use different types of tools in terms of gathering the requirement and managing the requirement. Now, whenever we are selecting a particular tool for requirements management, we need to understand which tool best suits our environment. So, for example, if you are considering a change management project wherein the project is maintenance and support in nature, so in that context, we may not use all the features offered by your requirement management tool. We would be using very selective feature of the requirement management tool. So we have to understand whether these tools, particular to this particular tool, should we be using this particular feature or not. For example, if you consider Jira, now Jira has a counterpart called as Confluence, wherein all your document repository is stored. Like we have Microsoft SharePoint, similarly Jira has something called as Confluence, wherein we store our documents as a repository. Now, in order to use that particular tool, Jira, we have different types of users in a particular project. Now, some users may be a business analyst who would be using this tool to write user stories, acceptance criteria, define the epics, and so on. Then there would be developers who would be creating tasks around that particular user stories, logging their effort, defining their story points, and all those things. Then it would be QA people who would be using Jira tool for logging issues or defects or any XYZ category of item, and they should also be able to track their particular efforts in that particular tool. Now this category of user have different needs to solve through that particular tool. Now a project manager would be more interested to look for the burn down chart or the velocity of a particular sprint cycle or sprint plan or whatever. So a project manager is not the right term when we touch base with the agile context. It is essentially the product owner. So product owner is essentially responsible for uh, validating the velocity or checking the burn down hours or pulling up the status reports and so on. So these different category of user, whether it's a product owner or a developer or a business analyst or a quality assurance person, we have to understand what are their needs. Basis on their needs, we would identify which tool is best suited for our no, I mean our project requirements management purpose. So depending on that, we would make a selection around the n number of tools that are available in the market. So whenever we pick a particular tool for our usage in a particular project, whether it's a software, whether it's a requirement management tool, or whether it's a QA execution tool, we have to do uh, I mean, round of analysis, round of feasibility check around whether this particular tool is suitable for our environment or not. So similarly, for requirement management, we would be first identifying our needs, and then basis on our needs, basis on the functionalities that we are looking for out of this particular tool or the functionalities that are expected out of this tool, we would be selecting that particular requirement management tool. Now, irrespective of whether it's coming from an outside vendor or it is offered by our internal organization itself. Now, these are some of the features that a tool should have: collaboration, defects, changes, dashboard reports, customization, security, resources, time, documents, test, requirements, issues. So these are the common features that are available across tool. Now, there are some additional features or there are some features which may not be of use for that particular project. So you have to keep that into consideration as well. Now, of late, what these companies are doing is like they are charging the customers basis on the features they use. For example, if they want to use the dashboard feature more, they charge that particular feature based on their needs. If they want to charge the defect feature, they want to use the defect feature more out of that particular tool, then they would be charging basis on that defect tool as well. So there are some vendors who charge their customer or the organization basis on the features they use the most. So it's not like every feature is free of cost. It is built basis on the feature they use. Especially we are in an era wherein cloud computing is at it as its peak at this point of time. So what cloud does is they charge you for whatever things you use. They do not charge for anything that you don't use. Now, one more consideration that you have to take here is um, most of the organization, they don't use a single tool for everything. Single tool for everything as in if you consider Visual Studio Online, which is offered from Microsoft, and if you consider Jira, the costing is, uh, there's a huge difference between both tools costing. Visual Studio costing is much higher than Jira's costing. So Jira is available, let's say, for as low as $10 a month. But Visual Studio is not like that. Visual Studio is a very costly tool offered by Microsoft. Now, if you consider the functionalities, they offer kind of similar type of functionalities like requirements management offered by both, then defect tracking offered by both, defect logging offered by both, code check-in. Now code check-in is something that is directly integrated with Visual Studio when it comes to Microsoft. and when it comes to Jira, it is integrated with your GitHub. So there are different, what I would say, two different vendors when it comes to, tracking or versioning your code in that particular project. So there is a difference here. So depending on the security aspect of that organization, the company would choose which tool to go for which particular stage. For example, they may choose Jira for only requirements management. They may choose this Microsoft Visual Studio for only coding and tracking purposes. Tracking means code tracking and code versioning. Like we have requirement versioning, the developer do their code versioning and tracking as well. So they may choose Visual Studio for code tracking and versioning purpose. And when it comes to testing, they may use a different tool altogether. They may use Selenium for execution. And if there are any option that would help them log their particular defect in Jira itself, they can integrate that Selenium with Jira, else they may use a different system. So depending on the phase, they may choose their own tool as well, or they may choose a single tool for everything: analysis, development, and testing. Or they may use different tool for different stages, like analysis Jira, requirement analysis and gathering Jira, then for development Visual Studio, and for testing they may use Selenium along with HP's project portfolio management. So there is no hard and fast rule that the project would use only a single tool or they would use different tools. Depending on the suitability and depending on the environment and situation, they may choose their own tools for respective phases. Now, what are the essential tasks that you would do in a requirement management context? So these are the 5 important tasks that you would do during your requirements management. The very first task is your tracing of a requirement. Now, when we maintain a relationship between a requirement and its design and solution component, we are essentially tracing that particular requirement with a particular unique ID. Let's say you have written a requirement with an ID BRD, or you may write it as functional requirement FR-001. Now that is a textual requirement. Now when you elaborate that particular textual requirement, you would come up with various design artifacts like a UI screen, and you would name that UI screen with UI-001. You would create an UML use case. You would name that UC-001. So all this FR-001, UI-001, UC-001 should serve as a single requirement. So essentially, we are maintaining a relationship between them. Okay, this is the requirement. For this requirement, this is the UI screen that you have to refer. This is the use case that you have to refer. And this is the process flow that you have to refer. So depending on the requirement, you would trace or maintain a relationship between those requirements. That is what this particular tracing of requirements pointer talks about in requirements management. Then comes maintaining the requirement. Now, when it comes to maintaining a requirement, you need to ensure that the requirements and designs are accurate and current throughout the life cycle. Now, let's say you have created one particular requirement with a version number V-001. Now your customer comes to you and he modifies that particular requirement. So you accept his particular modification and you instruct the development team to code the system basis on the modified requirement. So he coded that particular system, he delivered that particular system. Now after that particular system is delivered to the customer comes to you and the customer says, okay, we have a modified, we have received an updated system basis on the requirement which we gave. Now, can you tell me where you have documented that requirement? Now, since you have not documented that requirement, you have directly instructed the development team to get this requirement updated. So there would be a clash. So in order to avoid that clash, you need to ensure that all your requirements are always up to date basis on whatever we are developing in that particular system context. No matter it's a simple change in the label of a particular system, or it's a simple change in the color of a particular UI. Everything has to be maintained and has to be kept accurate throughout our requirements management lifecycle. That is what this maintain requirements talks about. Now next it talks about prioritizing the requirement. Now prioritizing, as we already know, we did so many exercises on prioritizing, like how do we go about ranking that particular requirement, or how do we do a Moscow analysis around must have, could have, should have feature. So it's very important for us to keep our requirements prioritized. Like this particular sprint is ending in next week. So we have to plan our sprint during this week itself. That what would the development team do after they have delivered that particular sprint. So essentially what we need to do is we have to keep our requirements prioritized. So once their sprint get over, we would hand over them a bunch of user stories or bunch of requirements which they can start coding once this particular sprints get ended. Then comes assess requirement changes. Now here we need to evaluate new and changing stakeholder requirement to determine if they need to be acted on within the scope of the change. Now when it comes to assessing a requirement changes, now there is a huge conflict between the initial agreed scope and what they are asking for now. Now your scope may be something initially, and what they are asking at this point of time may not be part of that particular scope. So you have to clearly educate your customer that, see, this is not something that have been agreed upon. You have given us a different set of features list to code upon, and this is something that is beyond the scope what has been agreed upon. So you have to educate the customer. Now before educating the customer, you have to first assess your requirements changes, whether the requirements what they are asking falls under the current scope or it is something beyond the scope. So that is what it talks about, assessing requirement changes. Now you cannot assess a requirement change upfront by just looking at what customer has given you via email or via a call. You have to hit back to your requirements management tool and you have to check whether this falls under the scope or not. In that context also, your requirement management tool would help you understand whether this particular change is in scope or out of scope. So ultimately it would help you assess any requirement changes. Then comes approving your requirements. Now, when it comes to approval of a particular requirement, you tend to go through different stakeholders and their viewpoint and their perspectives around the requirement. Remember, when you are working as a business analyst, every stakeholder would come to you with a different perspective. Now you have to listen to all the stakeholders, since that's an integral part of your job as a business analyst. But the solution or the approach that you give to them or the options that you give to them has to be in such a manner that it should suffice everyone's needs. So it shouldn't be like you would make out of 5 stakeholders, 3 stakeholders are happy and 2 stakeholders are unhappy about that requirement. It's your duty as a business analyst to bring everyone on the same page. You can apply different techniques like ranking a particular requirement basis on their feedback, or you can take an expert judgment from a specialized consultant within your organization, and you have to convince them. You have to apply your negotiation skills when it comes to approving your requirement. So that is what this particular pointer talks about. Your approved requirement should be there in your requirements management tool. So you have to also follow a governance process when it comes to approving a particular requirement. Now, what is governance process when it comes to approving a particular requirement? So whenever you want to get a requirement approved from a respective stakeholder, you cannot go to that stakeholder every time for saying that, hey, I have created my requirement, and you can have a look and get it approved if you feel like. So again, he would say, okay, I would like to make some modification, and this is the updated comments that I would like to modify. Then again, you have to send it to them. Then again, they modify it. So back and forth, there are a lot many things going on. Now, since all these things are happening via email, you cannot properly establish a governance process. So what this requirement management tool offers you, it offers a governance process. So everything is being traced in that particular requirement management tool. If your customer is asking you something, you have to put comments on that particular tool. Okay, this part is something that you have to update. And if you have updated that particular portion of the requirement and resent it back to the customer, you inform them through that requirement management tool. So what essentially is happening? You are establishing a governance process through that requirement management tool. Apart from that, governance can also be established through the statuses of that particular requirement. For example, requirements writing in progress, or requirement gathering in progress, requirement completed, approval in progress, requirements approved, requirements ready for development. So these are typical statuses that a specific requirement goes through in a requirement management tool. Now, why this requirement changes its status? It's because of this governance process. So the process that you have set in terms of approving your requirement, you have to follow that particular process throughout the project life cycle, and for every excuse me, and for every requirement that you write for that particular project, you have to follow the same governance process. Now this is your requirement life cycle. So your requirement life cycle begins with the representation of the business need as a requirement. So business needs we already understood, like whenever there is a need, those needs are essentially the requirements that we elicit, and they are at a later point of time developed as an actual system. They continue through the development of a solution and ends when the solution and the requirements that represents itself are retired. Now, what is retiring of a particular requirement? Now, whatever system you develop at this point of time, it is bound to retire at a certain specific period of time. So, whenever your system gets retired, your requirement life cycle ends over there. Your requirement life cycle starts with the business needs. From business needs, it gets converted into business requirement. From business requirement, it gets converted into implemented system. From implemented system, it gets converted to an operational system. And from operational system, it gets converted to an retired system. Once the business stakeholder decide that this is now a legacy system, we have to migrate ourselves to a newer version of the system, or we have to build a newer system in parallel, and we have to migrate all the information from the legacy system to the newer system and completely retire this legacy system. Now, every company does this, every project does this. After a specific period of time, maybe 5 years is too early. After every 10 years, they tend to retire their existing system. So there are a couple of reasons why they retire their existing system. So those reason could be probably the software framework is no more supported by the newer vendors that are available in the market, or probably there could be a case that the system drivers or the servers are unable to handle those legacy codes. So in that context, there is no option left. This company are forced to retire that particular solution and come up to a newer system. So there is Microsoft way of doing this. So what Microsoft does is whenever they launch a new product, they increase the support price of the older product so that people are bored of that support price, and instead of investing so high on supporting a legacy system, they prefer migrating to a newer system. So that is Microsoft strategy. So similarly, there are different companies who come up with their own strategy around retiring a particular requirement. So in our business analysis context as well, we retire the solution or the requirement at specific period of time, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so on. And that is the life cycle of requirement. Then the management of requirement does not end once the solution is implemented. Like I said, once you uh, develop and deliver the code to the customer, the management of the requirement doesn't stop there. There are always change requests coming for you. So you have to keep on managing those change requests. And if there are some change requests that would impact the existing developed system, then you have to trace and fit in those requirements wherever they belongs to in your requirements management tool. And throughout the life of solution, requirements continue to provide value when they are managed appropriately. So I have seen multiple instances in my career wherein the requirements, if they are not managed properly, they create unnecessary confusion within the change request. For instance, if you have developed a functionality X and your customer is saying that this functionality should be modified to X dot 1, and after a certain period of time the functionality is modified to x dot 2, x dot 3, x dot 4, and at some point of time the customer comes to you and they would ask you, okay, what was the functionality that was there in x dot 2? So if it is not managed properly, how would you able to answer your customer? So it's your responsibility that you manage the functionalities appropriately as and when required. Now, within your requirements lifecycle knowledge area, the concept of lifecycle is separate from a methodology or process. Now, this lifecycle, this business needs to implementation to retiring a particular solution, this is altogether different from what's the methodology or process we use. Now, what are the methodology and process? Like we are working in agile environment or waterfall environment or so on. So these are two different things. They are not same thing. Although you would be using a methodology in every project, waterfall or agile, but requirement lifecycle management is a different thing. It has no relationship with this particular methodology or process to govern the business analysis for. Irrespective of whatever methodology you are working as a business analyst, it's not any way related to your requirement lifecycle management. It's a separate thing altogether. It's a separate knowledge area altogether. Now, life cycle refers to the existence of various phases or states that the requirement pass through as part of any changes. Like I said, requirements are, writing in progress, requirement gathering in progress, requirement designing in progress, requirement approval in progress, and requirement is approved. So these are some of the statuses or some of the stages your requirements would go through, and eventually your requirements would be done. So your requirements would go through different phases or stages when it comes to requirement lifecycle management or managing your requirement. Now, requirements can be in multiple states at one time. What does it mean is like, uh, let's say you write a particular requirement in a particular point at this point of time. Now that requirement is complete at this point of time, but the related requirement that you are writing. So first we would do a functional decomposition around a particular requirement, higher level requirement. Now out of that functional decomposition, we would come across multiple smaller pieces of requirement. Now out of those multiple smaller piece of requirement, let's say two requirements are complete at this point of time. Okay, it has got the necessary approval and it is ready for development, but the interrelated requirements that needs this requirement or this requirement has dependency on it is not yet complete. So in that case, what would be the requirement stage at this point of time, or what would be the requirement states at this particular point of time? So this requirement would be on hold stage. Why it would be on hold stage? Because the dependent requirement is not yet finished. Until and unless we don't finish the dependent requirement, we cannot pick up this particular requirement. So there are multiple instances or multiple scenarios in a particular project you would find wherein the requirements are complete, but because the dependent requirement is not complete at this point of time, you cannot do this particular requirement. So this is something that you have to keep a track on when you are doing a requirements lifecycle management. Now then comes your process called as change management process. Now what is a change management process? What does this picture indicate to you?
Firefighting?
Okay, that is fire, that is understood. From a context of change, what you could understand?
Critical?
Yes. If we don't change on time, then it would be a huge risk at a certain point of time. Okay, so whenever you see a particular change in a particular project or something that your stakeholder is asking to you, do not ignore it or do not keep it to the end. So a simple thing kept till the end may cause you in this situation. It may engulf the entire project. So whatever your project sponsor or your business stakeholder are asking, pay detailed attention towards it. Even a simple thing can put you in huge trouble. So change is more like a thing. If it is done at the right time, it is good for everyone, and if it is missed, it would put you in this situation or your project in this particular situation. So that is the change management process in every project. First, the customer would request for a change. That is step one. After the customer has request for a change, we need to do an impact analysis from our perspective as a business analyst, whether it is impacting any other XYZ requirements that we have documented so far. If not, then we have to clearly make them understand. Now, once we have done the impact analysis, we send that impact analysis document to our business sponsor or the stakeholder who is requesting for this particular change. So after that, what he does, he either approves it or he denies it. Now, approval chances are more rather than denying because he has requested for change. Now, once he has approved it, we go about implementing that particular change. Now, implementing that particular change is essentially coding and developing that particular change followed by your testing. Now, once that particular change is implemented, you can review that particular change, how that has impacted our particular system or whether it is giving the necessary outcome or not, and you can maintain a particular report that okay, basis on your change request, this is how it is working and this is the report. Now this is a case when your requirement is approved at the first place. Now what it would be the case when the requirements are or your impact analysis artifact is denied? When it is denied, you have to modify the artifact and resend it back for approval. Now, this may take a while from impact analysis stage to reach to implementation change because of this particular process, approval and denial. You may have to go back and forth multiple times to get the final version of the impact analysis document approved. Only after that you can do the implementation of that particular change. Now, this is something that happens in a change management process, which ultimately deals or links to your requirement lifecycle management process. So you have to also consider the end-to-end change management process in place. Now, this is a completely exhaustive knowledge area. Area within project management. How do we do the change management process? So managing change or doing the change management, it's a completely different area. We won't go in depth into that. If you want to read more about this change management process from a project management context, you can always refer to Exelo's website. So they have very good knowledge material available over there. You can go through this change management process, but at a higher level, this is the process that takes place. Now we'll start with our very first activity in requirements management core principle, that is tracing of requirement. How do we go about tracing the requirement and why it is needed at the first place? Now the purpose of tracing is to ensure that the requirements and design at different levels are aligned to one another. We have to maintain a particular traceability so that it is easily accessible for everyone, not only for business analysts, for the development team, for the quality assurance guy, or for the project manager, or for the business sponsor. It has to be easily accessible, it has to be faster, and it also helps us do the impact analysis. Like if there is an requirement portion that has been added in between the particular requirement, then that is something that can help us do a thorough impact analysis in a very simplified manner. So that is also one of the reasons why we do change tracing a requirement. Then we have to understand the reliable discovery of inconsistencies and gap in requirement. This is a very important part. Now, whenever we are doing a traceability of a particular requirement, we tend to identify different types of inconsistencies and gap in a particular requirement. Now, what are these inconsistencies and gap? These are missing elements within a particular requirement. So let's say someone is writing a requirement that in a distributed system architecture, your request would always go from um, this particular server to this particular server, server A to server B. Now, when you are doing an impact analysis for that particular requirement, you see there is a server C and D also available. Now, you have written the requirement that this particular requirement would go from server A to server B. Now, I mean, this particular request would go from server A to server B. Now, after that, what the server C and D would do? Are there any dependent requirement? Because they cannot sit idle, server C and D. There has to be some connecting element for that. So for that reason, you have to see all this server in that particular distributed architecture, whether the requests are being distributed properly or not. If you constantly tend to overload server A and server B, and at the same point of time server C and server D is completely empty, that doesn't make any sense, right? The server A and B would be heavily overloaded and server C and D are completely blank. You have to maintain a load balancing over there. So you have to identify those kind of inconsistencies and gap in a requirement. This is just an example, but in real scenario also, there could be multiple chances that there are some inconsistencies and gaps in requirement, which this tracing of requirement would solve when you start tracing a particular requirement. So what you do here is you join all the pieces and see if there are any missing pieces of the requirement, and if there are any, then you have to report. So through tracing of requirement, you should be easily able to identify those missing piece of requirement. Then comes deeper insights into the scope and complexity of the change. Like whenever a change comes to you or a CR comes to you, you need to first identify its complexity and the depth of that particular change, whether it's a small, medium, large, extra large, or what is the complexity or the size of that particular change, whether it's easy, whether it's hard, whether it's difficult. How do you identify it? You identify it with the help of tracing that particular requirement, what all areas it is impacting. Size we can assess, that is the secondary thing, but we need to first assess the complexity. And how do we come about a conclusion for complexity? By assessing the scope. We would first assess the scope. Okay, these all areas it is impacting, then this is a complex thing. If we change this, then the other things also needs to be changed. That would give us the complexity information. And size is the other factor which would essentially accommodate or substitute, what I would say, add up to the manual effort associated with that particular change of the requirement. So traceability also helps us understand this. Then comes the reliable assessment on which requirement has been addressed and which have not. So whatever requirements you have addressed when it comes to impact analysis, traceability of the requirements gives a good overview about which requirements have been assessed and which are the requirements that has to be addressed at a later point of time. So you can essentially keep a track on what all things you have done today and what all things that you are going to do tomorrow, if the analysis of that particular change is taking you more than 1 to 3 days. So traceability would help you in that process as well. Now, when it comes to traceability, there are essentially four things in traceability: forward tracing your requirement, backward tracing your requirement, bidirectional traceability, and requirement traceability matrix. Now, you would essentially tracing the requirement with the help of requirement traceability matrix. It has the forward and backward traceability that is performed in your requirement traceability matrix. Now, within that requirement traceability matrix, these are the three activities that you would do. Now, what is forward tracing a requirement? Mapping takes place from requirements to end product. Like if you want to identify, let's say you are testing out a particular system. Now you want to identify which requirement gave rise to this functionality. For example, you have a profile a screen in front of you. You want to identify which particular requirement, sorry, that's a reverse example I am giving. It's like this way. You have a piece of requirement in place. Let's say you are a business stakeholder. You have a piece of requirement in place with you. Now you want to see this particular requirement in action in the end product. For example, the profile screen example, I would say I have the profile screen UI mockup in front of me, and I want to see whether my requirement conforms to the end product or not, to the actual build system or not. So what I would do, I would map my requirements to the end product. I would first look at my requirement and then go about comparing the actual build system. That is forward traceability. In backward traceability, what happens, we first look at the system and then we check the requirement. We would first see the functionality in action in that particular system, and then we would refer to the UI screen and mockup. So these are the two kinds of traceability that you do in requirement traceability matrix. Then comes your bidirectional traceability, wherein you would do both the process in a sequence. First, you would trace the requirement to the end product and end product back to the requirement with the help of bidirectional traceability. Now, bidirectional traceability helps us to ensure that all requirements are covered by test cases. So, ideally, testers do this bidirectional traceability. They first check the requirement, they see the system, then they see the system and come back to the requirement and do a end-to-end validation. And all of this is done through a requirement traceability matrix. Now, how your requirement traceability matrix looks like? It looks like something this. This is a manual traceability document that I have created. Now, if you see here, I have the module. So this is an agile thing wherein we have epic, stories, use case name, and the requirement ID. So in this user management module, we have registration functionality, login functionality, forgot password via OTP, and dashboard functionality. And these are its use cases. And these are my requirements ID. So remember, requirements ID are all unique in nature. Now, when I want to identify an interrelated requirement, so these are interrelated requirement. So UMD6 is related to this particular requirements SO1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So SO1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is related to UMD6. UMD7 is also related to SO1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So essentially, there's a relationship between these two requirements. So what is this particular relationship is we have maintained a traceability of that particular requirement. Now, if you see, I have written the corresponding requirements like user management is the main module. Then I have written the functionality, description of the functionality in the use case name. Then I have given a unique requirement ID. I have also given a requirement type. Then if there are any related requirement ID, I have created that. And then I have created the necessary artifacts traceability like prototype. Then I have linked it to the development team, whether what should be the complexity, story point, sprint cycle, which sprint cycle it would be part of, what is the QA status, which release version it would go, and what should be the release date. So if someone asks me tomorrow that, okay, for UM1, what is the release date? So I would go to this traceability matrix and find out the release date. If someone asks me tomorrow that for UM5, what is the release version? So I would go back to this particular traceability and find the release version. If someone asks me what is the prototyping status for UM5, I can go to this particular traceability and find, okay, prototype is in process and it is pending. What is the development status? So these are some of the common questions that some of your stakeholder may ask you pertaining to a particular requirement. So all of them would be answered by your requirement traceability matrix. If someone asks you that, okay, I would like to create a new dashboard. So how and where you would introduce that particular requirement amongst the story, you would somewhere introduce in between this particular dashboard. So after UMD5, you would be creating UMD6. So remember, you have to maintain a consistency. If you are doing your traceability manually, then whatever is your functionality name, you have to start with that particular word and start sequencing from that particular word. For example, user management, I have started with user management dashboard, I have started with UMD1. So if supposing tomorrow someone adds a new requirement, you can say UMD6 or UM7. You may not create any such particular ambiguous term. So if you are doing it manually, then you have to maintain this practice. And if you are doing it with the help of a system like Jira, these IDs are automatically generated. So nothing that you have to do. You have to only link these three things in Jira. So all your ID part would be taken, auto-generated by Jira. And once you link them together, IDs are automatically linked with each other. No additional steps needed over here. In case you are going manually, then you have to follow this practice. Okay. So when it comes to tracing a particular requirement, there are certain relationships that we have to establish when it comes to traceability. So there are essentially four relationships: derive, depend, satisfy, and validate. Now, what is a derived relationship? So it's a relationship between two requirements used when a requirement is derived from another requirement. Like the example I gave you. So if a particular requirement is deriving out of a particular requirement, in that context, I would create a derived relationship. For example, in this particular requirement, register a new user. Now register a new user via Facebook and register a new user via Google. So these two requirements are essentially derived out of this particular new user requirement. Okay, so in derived relationship, we need to first understand which requirement is deriving out of what requirement. For example, registering a new user is our base requirement. Then registering a new user via Facebook is our derived requirement. Similarly, registering a new user via Google is our derived requirement. So essentially, this is the base requirement and these are two derived requirement, which essentially does the same functionality but with a different context. So that is what your derived relationship talks about. Then comes your depends relationship. So it's a relationship between two requirements used when a requirement depends on another requirement in terms of necessity and in terms of effort. Like I gave you an example, there is a requirement A, there is a requirement B. Until and unless you don't complete requirement B, requirement A cannot be developed or requirement A cannot be started work on. So in that context, you would be using depends requirement. Depends relationship. In our case, if you see somewhere at this particular line, these are dependent requirement for UMD6. These are dependent requirement for UMD7. So until and unless these are finished, you cannot start with this particular requirement. Then comes satisfy relationship. So satisfy relationship is between an implementation element and the requirement it is satisfying. For example, the relationship between a functional requirement and a solution component that is implementing it. For example, in our forward tracing context, wherein we used to compare our requirements with the actual end system. Now, whether that end product or system is satisfying what we have documented, that is something we have to maintain a relationship. Whether the requirements is delivered or not. In an agile context, if we say definition of done, which is essentially given by developers, what it talks about is whether it conforms to the requirements that has been given by the product owner, whatever acceptance criteria he has outlined, whether the developer or the development team has sufficed that particular necessary acceptance criteria or not. So that is essentially they are satisfying that particular acceptance criteria. So all your requirement would conform to the solution component that you build. After that comes your validation of a requirement or a validate relationship, wherein your relationship between a requirement and a test case or other elements that can determine whether a solution fulfills the requirement. Like the example we just saw, wherein my epics, my user stories, my use cases, prototype, they are linked with each other. Now, when I would say my requirement is complete, when the requirement conforms to all of these interlinked elements, no matter it's a test case as well. So whatever elements they are linked to, it has to complete all those elements. right from your BRD to FRD till your use cases, UML, process flows, test cases, whatever it is linked with that particular requirement. Until and unless they are not complete, we cannot validate that particular requirement. So that's a validate relationship when it comes to requirement traceability. Next task that we do in requirement traceability is we maintain the requirements. Now we have traced the requirement, now we maintain the requirement. Now, why do we need to maintain the requirement? One of the primary reason is for reusage of that particular requirement. To retain requirement accuracy and consistency, if there are any new requirements coming into the project, we have to maintain it so that there is no complexity or ambiguous situation in that particular project around missing of a particular requirement. And what do we achieve out of maintaining or reusing that particular requirement? We have the requirement consistently represented. We review and approve for maintenance using a standardized process that defines proper access rights and ensures quality and easily accessible and understandable stuff. Now, why do we need to put special emphasis on access right? Because there are certain elements in a particular requirement uh, gathering process which we do not intend other stakeholder to see. For example, if a developer want to access some business artifacts which they are not supposed to do, we have to restrict them. So that is the reason why they do a development team may not have access to all the requirement documents, and that is probably one of the reason why they reach out to the business analyst for requirement clarification, because they do not have the entire visibility in place in certain situation. Now, these are the responsibilities of a business analyst when it comes to maintain and reuse a particular requirement. So they are responsible for conducting maintenance to ensure the level of accuracy is returned. The requirement documents are always up to date, and all your requirements are properly maintained and they are clearly named and defined. All the unique ID, all the description of the requirement, who all are the stakeholder that are able to access that particular requirement, all of this information is properly maintained. Now they are also responsible to maintain relationship amongst the requirement or the set of requirement, and while eliciting requirement, business analyst elicit requirement attributes properly through their requirements management abilities. Now what are requirement attributes and properties? We have already discussed. And the other aspect for maintaining a requirement is reusage of the requirement within the current project or initiative, within similar project or initiative, within similar departments, or throughout the entire organization, like I explained. And information management approach, I already explained you. It indicates how requirements would be managed for reusage. Now, next step is prioritizing the requirement. We have traced the requirement, we have maintained the requirement. Now it's time to prioritize the requirement. Now, prioritization of the requirement is to rank the requirement, like we already saw, basis on their importance to that particular project. And what do we achieve after doing prioritizing a particular requirement? Is like we find the interdependencies between the requirement, the complexity, the size of the requirement, and all those stuff. Now, when we do prioritization, these are some of the bases on which we do prioritization. Like, what are the benefits associated with the prioritization? If we do not prioritize a particular requirement, what are the penalties associated with it? What would be the cost of prioritization? Are there any risk, dependencies, or time sensitivity associated with prioritization? And what is the stability of prioritization? And at the end, if there are any regulatory or policy compliance needed for prioritization. Now, what are the regulatory and policy compliance? Let's say US government want to launch a particular initiative in or a particular regulatory norm in December this year. Now it's October. Now, does it make sense to prioritize those December requirement now? No, that is a regulatory thing that would come in December. So it's good that whatever interrelated elements are there or whatever infrastructure related elements are there, we need to prioritize that first, so that November we can start working on and December we can roll out as the regulatory norm comes in effect. Now, there are certain challenges when it comes to prioritization. So, it is an assessment of relative value. Each stakeholder may value something different. Like I said, every stakeholder would be coming to you with a different perspective. So, you have to satisfy everyone's perspective and you have to hear them properly. And at the same time, you have to ensure that the official trade-offs are happening formally in that particular meeting, and you are getting a particular sign off around prioritizing the requirement, because every stakeholder would say that this requirement is more important to me. So you cannot go by what one stakeholder says. You have to listen to all the stakeholders and you have to do a ranking of the outcomes that they give you, and basis on that a cumulative prioritization is something expected out of here, wherein you have to bring all the stakeholders on the same page by educating them around the importance of that particular requirement. If someone is still confusing, still in confusion, you can always educate them and always explain them the significance around that particular requirement. After that, you have to ensure all the different types of requirement would respond to different criterias in the same way or may appear to conflict. Now, conflict is a very common thing that would happen when it comes to prioritization because of various stakeholder perception. So there are ways how to solve these conflicts. You can take someone's help, or you can reach out to your senior authority for resolving this conflicts. So conflicts are bound to happen. That's a pretty common thing. Now, when it comes to prioritization, it's not a one-time process. It's a continual process. Throughout your project lifecycle, you have to keep on prioritizing your requirement. Now, essentially, in an agile project, this prioritization, as we saw, every 3 weeks or 4 weeks is bound to happen. So this is a continual process. We can't help it out. Now, since the requirements are always in an um, you know upgrading stage or always have a scope of improvement, it keeps on prioritizing itself continuously. So you have to listen to your stakeholder and you have to understand what's the benefit they are looking for when it comes to continual prioritization, and you have to take a call accordingly. Now we saw tracing requirement, maintaining requirement, prioritizing requirement. Now it's time to assess requirements changes. Now the purpose of requirement assessment in context to changes is to evaluate the implication of proposed changes to the requirements and design. So here we need to assess changes. So how do we assess the changes? If a change request comes to a business analyst, we have to align it with the overall strategy or overall functionality of the system. Basis on that, we have to assess that particular change. After that, we have to ensure that whether it affects the value delivered to the business or stakeholder group. Now, put special emphasis on delivered. Delivered means something is already delivered and this is a change. Whether this change would affect something that has been already delivered. So you have to ensure that. After that, whether it impacts the time to deliver or the resource required to deliver the value. So whatever the timelines are specified or whatever the resources costing are specified, are they impacted because of this particular change? You need to ensure that whether if there are 2 resources allocated to this particular project and if this change requires 5 resources, then it's definitely a concern and it would be a time consuming process. So you need to ensure that whatever resources you have at this point of time, will this change be accommodated within those many number of resources or whatever it is. And apart from that, if there are any alteration needed from a risk perspective, opportunities perspective, or are there any constraint associated with the overall initiative or program or change, then you have to consider that as well. Now, when it comes to assessing requirements changes, you have to assess the formality. Now, here we have to define or determine the formality of the assessment process based on the information available. So your proposed change may be withdrawn from consideration or declined before any formal review is required. So a predictive approach may indicate a more formal assessment. Now, predictive approach is nothing but your waterfall approach. You have to assess the formality first. Formality first means this is the time wherein if there is a change request coming in and the change request is too huge in nature and you need few extra resources to complete that particular resource. So you have to justify it that why you need that extra resource. Now, how do you justify it? You have to justify it formally. Probably you would write a small business case that giving your justification why you would need um, extra resources to complete this particular piece of requirement. If there is a timing associated with it, for example, instead of the customer quoted 1 month of time, you feel that the requirement would take 3 months of time because customer would always quote less time. So you have to give them a justification around why it would take 3 months of time. So those justification has to be assessed and given formally. So there are chances that your justification may be denied or it would be approved. If it is approved in the first time, then it's fine. Otherwise, you have to come to an agreement wherein between 1 to 3 months, you have to select 2 months or 2.5 months basis on the justification you provided. Now, all this thing won't happen instantly. So predictive approach is a very good thing or is an ideal approach which you should adapt when it comes to assessing formality of the requirements change. Now you would also do impact analysis when it comes to requirement change. That is the only way to get out of assessing requirement change. In impact analysis, you would do all your cost benefit analysis, impact, schedule, urgency, how urgently it is required. All those parameters you would touch base with. What is the benefit associated with this particular change? What are the costs associated with this particular change? How it would impact to the other elements of the system? What is the schedule of this particular change? How soon it can be completed? What is the urgency? How soon it is needed? And if there are any impact, how it would be resolved. For example, depending on the planned approach, various stakeholder, which also includes business analysts, may be authorized to approve, deny, or defer the proposed change. So all impacts and resolution resulting from the change analysis are to be documented and communicated to all the stakeholders. So whoever the stakeholders are, whatever is your resolution based on your impact analysis needs to undergo through a formal round of approval. Basis on everyone's agreement, whether they approve it or deny it, you go about assessing or incorporating this particular change. So we saw tracing requirement, maintaining requirement, then we saw prioritizing the requirement, assessing requirement changes. Now it's time to see the final activity, that is approving requirements. Now, why do we need requirement approval? Because we need an official confirmation from the business stakeholders or the business sponsor who is essentially investing in this particular project. Without their official confirmation or approval, we cannot actually start with uh, implementing this particular requirement. For that reason, we need to get this requirements approved. So this is a very important step in any requirements management process to get the requirement approved, because uh, if we don't approve the requirement or if we do not get approved requirement and if developers implement a wrong thing in a particular system, then we are the first person who would be blamed that a BA gathered incorrect requirement, the BA had missing requirement, the BA I mean gathered ambiguous requirement. So in order to avoid such circumstances, we always make in practice that we get our requirements approved. For that matter, all the artifacts related to the particular requirement, HLD, LLD, or any XYZ design document, all the documents we have to get it approved. Now, what purpose does approving a requirement solve? So they are ensuring, business analysts are ensuring a clear communication of requirements with the respective stakeholder. So we are having a constant communication with the customer that this is the latest and updated requirement, this is the prioritized requirement, this is the XYZ category of requirement that you have approved for us. So we are doing, or we are having a formal, what I would say, formal review or a round of review from the business stakeholders, that this is the requirement, this is the detailing we have done as a business analyst, and this is how it should look like. And basis on that, if the business stakeholders are convinced, they give us the sign off via any XYZ mode of communication. It could be via email, it could be via your requirement management tool, or it could be via SharePoint repository. Depending on the tool that are available in that particular project, we get a sign off. So a predictive approach has more formal process of approval rather than adaptive process. So predictive is your waterfall and adaptive is your agile process. So agile, as we know, we have constant customer feedback, wherein they have the liberty to change the requirement a day before the delivery of the requirement as well. So tomorrow is your delivery of the sprint, they have the flexibility to change the requirement today itself as well. So that is considered as an not that much formal approach, although it's an formal and official approach of approving the requirement. But predictive approach is more, what I would say, approval friendly process when it comes to comparing between these two processes, predictive and adaptive approaches, in terms of approving a particular requirement. Now, these are the couple of responsibilities that a business analyst is supposed to deal with when it comes to approving the requirement. We need to first understand the stakeholder role. Who is the stakeholder? Is it a business sponsor? Is it a business representative? Is it a developer? Who has the authority of approving that particular requirement? Then you have to understand the conflict and issue management. Like I said, there are different stakeholders with different perspectives. We need to understand their conflicts, why they are disagreeing on a particular part. And then we have different techniques for it, like I already explained you, ranking and all those stuff. You have to apply those techniques and come to a cumulative conclusion wherein everyone is on the same page. And then you have to gain everyone's approval in and around it. Whoever had that conflict or issue, you have to solve it first, and then you have to gain everyone's approval, and then you have to track and communicate approval. Now, why do we have to track and communicate approval? Because approval may not happen at the same time. There has to be a different rounds of modification that may be requested by your business stakeholder. So in order to mitigate that, we have to track and communicate our approval constantly. Now, tracking is like we have to track it with our business stakeholder, and communicate is like we have to communicate during our daily status reports that we send to our project managers or product owner, for that matter, that this particular requirement is expected to be signed off by the business in this day. This is the ETA associated with it, and ETA stands for estimated time of arrival, and this is when we are expecting to get this particular requirement. So you have to constantly track and communicate the approval. So these are the 5 things or the 5 tasks that you would do majorly as a business analyst when you are working in requirements lifecycle management knowledge area with the help of your requirements management tool. Now, there is an interesting concept called as progressive elaboration. Now, what is progressive elaboration? So it involves continuously improving and detailing a plan. So during an agile project, your agile project doesn't have clear visibility around what would be the final product. So it starts with this product, then it gets enhanced, then it gets enhanced further until you get a final product. So at this point of time, the product is capable of doing nothing. It's just a skeleton. Then it gets more stronger. Ultimately, you get a final operational product which works as per your needs. So progressive elaboration is that process wherein all your requirements or your system as a whole tend to elaborate itself progressively when your requirements are not known upfront. In that context, you would do progressive elaboration. Now, in agile world, there is a concept called as hypothesis testing. Now, what is hypothesis testing? Hypothesis testing is essentially conducted by your product owner. So, like we all know that in agile, requirements are constantly changed. Every sprint cycle, the requirements are changed. Now, one lesson to learn about that change is like the product owner always have the flexibility to test various things. For example, if he wants to launch a new product in a particular or a product is a very uh, high level thing. Let's say he want to introduce a new feature in a particular market. So what he would do, he would try to implement that feature in three different ways or four different ways in different sprint cycle, and tend to compare the results of these three or four sprint cycle, like which is the best suited way of implementing this particular feature. So this particular process is called as hypothesis testing, wherein the product owner tests the feasibility of a particular feature in different perspective or in different context, and whichever approach he feels confident about, that approach is something that goes to your operation environment or available to the end customer. So that is something being extensively used when we do progressive elaboration. So hypothesis testing is a technique that is extensively used in progressive elaboration, which is extensively in turn used in your agile context. So to summarize, today we covered understanding requirements management, what is change management process, what is tracing, baselining, versioning of a particular requirement. Under tracing requirement, we saw forward tracing requirements, backward tracing requirement, bidirectional traceability. What is requirement traceability matrix? We understood. How do we go about maintaining, reusing, and prioritizing requirement? How do we assess requirements changes? How do we approve requirements? What is the requirement approval process? The four statements. And then we saw what is progressive elaboration. Okay, so there are two things over here uh, under the umbrella of Atlassian. So Atlassian is the parent company for Jira Confluence. So they offer a bunch of tools. So for requirement management and defect tracking purpose, we use Jira, and for maintaining our documents, we use Confluence. Now they all go hand on hand, although they are different tools, but you can link them together. Now this is how your Jira tool looks like. We have a backlog, we have a board wherein we would be having all our issues or our planning board, what are to-do items, what are in progress item, and what are done, and these are the other stuff. Now before beginning to actually operating for Jira, so there is a profile section wherein you have to invite all the users who would be collaborating with you, like whatever users you would like to add in this particular application, you have to add them in that particular, sorry, in project settings you have to add it, not the profile settings. So here you could see people. Here you can go on adding the people whom you want to collaborate with. Like for my particular project under Zebra Corporation, I can add n number of people over here in the role of developer or administrator or member, whoever it is. Now this particular roles are configured by your Jira administrator, who would be configuring the role basis on who would be using that particular system, whether it's a developer, QA, or BA. After you have configured all those settings, as a business analyst, you should go about writing the user story. Now, in order to write a particular user story, you have to click on this create an issue tab. Now here there are different options you could see, epic and story. So let's say we select story. Now I write a story as a agent I should be able to search for a policy so that I can access the policy detail. So this is my story that I am writing. Now here you can attach all the necessary artifacts. For example, if there are any UML or use cases that you have created, you can attach that. You can attach it from a computer, or if it is stored in a Dropbox shared drive or Google Drive, you can do it that way as well. For example, if I click on my particular desktop and I pick one artifact, for example, a sample business requirement document, I can insert that file. This particular BRD relates to this particular user story. Then I would write the description of the user story in this particular description section, like description, this user story, we have to write it in this particular functionality, like the search functionality should result in policy numbers that are created by the respective agents. Why respective agents? Because there could be multiple agents who would be available in that particular system. After that, you have to write all your acceptance criteria, like the search functionality should allow agents to search based on policy number, or the search functionality should allow agents to search based on insured first name. The search functionality should have filters based on state. States as in, if it's a insured based in Texas, now that particular filtration we can give to that particular search functionality. So you have to highlight all the 50 states or whichever states that insurance company is operating on. So this is more about describing this particular functionality in a detailed level when you are defining the acceptance criteria. Now you have to make it a bit bold. After that, you have to put any labels if you want. We can put a label like search. Okay, and after that, if whom you want to assign it, whoever is the user. Now if there are anything, this is my epic. If you want to include this as a part of epic, you can include that particular feature under that epic. After that, you can create that particular user story. Now this user story is created. When I go to my backlog, I should see this particular user story. I can see this particular user story. Okay, now I do not have anything on this particular sprint 1 at this point of time. So there is a particular label and there is a particular epic. Now this particular epic auto insurance agent is having this particular item in this particular backlog. Now let me create few more user stories in the similar line. As an agent, I should be able to issue the policy for the insured. Description, I'll write the same thing. Right, same thing. This user story is now created. After the user story is created, I can edit it at any point of time. I don't know why I installed this Grammarly. It's unnecessary troublemaker. Okay, I would be needing few more user stories. As an agent should be able to pull a motor vehicle report. So this is a place wherein you could actually do the traceability. Let's say I want to link this particular user story to any one of this. So I can do so by clicking on this particular user story. So it would link to itself, the other user story. So if we see our backlog, it should be having 3 items under it. Let me create quickly few more user stories, 2 more. Should be to collect premium from the insured. These are some of the functionalities that I am looking for in this particular system, the insurance system. So we have a 5 user stories at this point of time, and we do not have any user stories at this point of time. So if we see sprint 1, it is completely blank. So what I would do, I would edit this particular user story, this particular sprint, and write it as sprint 1 work items and update it. So this is my sprint 1 work item. Then I would create one more sprint and edit the sprint as sprint 2 work item. Now I have created 2 sprint cycles over here, sprint 1 and sprint 2. Now I have to create some issues over here. I have to add some items into sprint 1 and sprint 2. So what I would do, I would click on this particular user story. I would close. Move to sprint 1. So you could see this user story is now part of sprint 1. I would put this in sprint 2. This user story is part of sprint 2. I would move it to sprint 1. Now this user story is part of sprint 1. Move it to sprint 2. Now when the developer would start working on, this is our prioritized sprints backlog, sprint 1 and sprint 2. And this are actual product backlog wherein all other user story would rest in. Until and unless these 2 sprints are not complete, this user story this user story cannot be picked up. Now, what if the case the sprint 1 ends and this user story is unable to complete? So what you have to do, you have to put it into the backlog. So there are 2 options over here. top of the backlog or bottom of the backlog. I would put it in a top of backlog. So it again went to backlog. Here what I would do, if in sprint 2 the backlog, in sprint 2 we are unable to complete this user story, so I will move it to the bottom of the backlog. So in the new version of Jira, you can move it to the top or bottom as well. Earlier this option wasn't there. So this is how you move item from product backlog to sprint backlog, and how you should create user story. Now coming to the assignment part. Now how do you do the assignment in this particular user story? So let's say you pick this particular user story, you would see over here assigning. So whoever is the people, so let's say you are having 10-15 people in that particular project, all the person name would appear over here. So you have to select that particular person and you have to assign that particular person like this. Now once that particular person is assigned this user story, he would receive an email notification that a particular user story is assigned to them. So he would do all the necessary stuff. Now before assigning, I have to put some comment. For example, I want this user story to get reviewed by my business stakeholder. So before assigning this user story to my business stakeholder, what I would write, I would comment it as, please review this user story and provide your sign off, and you would save the comment, so that when the user story you are assigning to that particular user over here, he should understand that okay, why this user story have came to his bucket. So he would read this comment and he would verify this user story. Now you have to also change the status from to do to in progress. That means this user story is not yet complete. So this status is, in real project you would be finding many other status like in development, in analysis, in review, requirements in progress. So there would be 10-15 other statuses that you would go through. So this is how your Jira thing work. Now board is something wherein it would show all your details. Now that we don't have sufficient number of stories, our board is looking like this. And once you populate with the required number of user story, you should be able to see the board in a different format. So this is how you do stuffs in Jira when it comes to requirements management. Of course, there are many other things that you could do through Jira when it comes to requirement management. This tool is free, the cloud version, for 7 days. You can register for this particular tool and have a hands-on on other functionalities that are offered by Jira. Now coming to your repository part. For repository, we have this Confluence in place. So this is an again offering from Atlassian, which helps us collaborate through the different types of documents, whatever documents we would like to uh, contribute or collaborate with other people. So when you click on this plus icon, it would ask you what type of activity that you want to do, whether you want to create a file list wherein you would upload a copy of document to be shared by different stakeholder, whether you would like to create an article or create a Jira report, or you want to do a project planning, product requirement retrospective. So depending on your needs, you can do different activities. For example, if you create a file list, you have to write a name for that file list, like requirement analysis documentation, and you can write a description like, this is the approved and signed off copy repository for our requirements documentation. And here you can give access to whoever user you want to share this document like. So that is something you are restricting the user. You cannot give access to everyone to this particular document. So you have to specify who all people you want to give access to. After that, you can go about creating this particular file list, and you can upload all your respective file through browse file. For example, if I click on this particular browse file, I can keep my business case template, BRD template, selected one at a time. So this file is now uploaded. If I want to add few more files like the proposal template, I can do so. And after you have uploaded this particular file, you can put your comments that hello. You can use @ symbol to send a notification to the user whom you want this document to be reviewed with, or whom you want to get notified or send notification that you have uploaded in this particular repository or path your document. So since we do not have any users at this point of time in Jira, it is not showing up the name, else it would have shown up the name over here. So you can write, hello, I have uploaded this particular document for your reference for our project collaboration purpose. So it is pretty much like SharePoint, but the options, the UI is a bit different over here. So it's essentially does the same thing, but in a different way. So Confluence is free for 30 days. You can register for Confluence and try it out. Ensure do not upload any sensitive document. So because this free version is publicly available, anyone can access this particular item. So even though you are uploading any document, ensure it is access restricted. So you can play around with Jira and